Welcome to the Heart for God podcast. With many years of experience pastoring and helping to start churches, Dr. Jim Townsley has some practical and biblical advice that can be a great help to you and your ministry. On this podcast, Dr. Townsley and other guests with special expertise cover a variety of topics. His goal is to help you lead your church to be a healthy, strong, and balanced ministry, and for your family to be happy, healthy, and living for the Lord.
Well, thanks for joining the podcast today. I'm glad that you're here, and I have with me a friend I've never met. We have a lot in common, I think, but we've crossed paths for decades.
Yes.
And yet never formally met, because I knew your brother and the Christian school.
My mentors.
Yeah, so many people we have in common. But so this is Clinton Vernoy. And Clint, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay. My dad was in the computer industry, and so we moved around a lot in my young age. And one of the places where we were was southern New Hampshire. And in southern New Hampshire, when I was 10 years old, I was called to preach at Tabernacle Baptist Church in Litchfield, New Hampshire. I later went back there when we had a Bible Institute in our church. I graduated from there, and then I was called to the mission field, and I was at Venezuela for 20 years, 10 in the city of Barquisimeto, and 10 of those years were in the jungle with Yekwana tribe. And then during the political instability of Venezuela during the 90s with Hugo Chavez, we were forced to leave the jungle, and then finally felt that the Lord had finished with us in Venezuela, and we left there. And God led us to go to Paraguay, South America, and we've been there for the last 20 years in a place called Ciudad del Este, which is a tri-border area between Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina, and we've established a church there.
So is there a tribal language there, or is it all Spanish? Or
in Paraguay or in Venezuela?
Paraguay.
In Paraguay, Paraguay is actually one of the few countries in the world that has two official languages. Almost all the people that are Paraguayan speak Guarani, but they speak like a mixture of it. It's called jopara, which is like salad, because it's a mixture of Spanish and Guarani. You can do anything officially, like legal things, documents can have to be, if someone wants it in Guarani, they have to do it. And then they have Spanish as the legal language, so we just speak Spanish.
Okay. Well, they make it complicated. That's something. Now, Venezuela, though, you were part of that time were in a tribal area, right?
Yes. We were on a tributary of the Orinoco River, about 2 weeks by canoe to get into where we were from the Orinoco River.
2 weeks?
2 weeks by canoe.
Wow.
We would fly, of course, from two of the main cities where the planes would pick us up, and it would be a 2-hour flight to get to where we were in a village called Chahuranya, which was a tributary of a tributary of a tributary of the Orinoco. And their language was Yekwana. And I can say something in that if you want me to say it.
Yeah, say something.
Hohe takwanyawa adua sada wanare dedu hake kamahutu sewa chiwanye, which means I'm very glad to be here this afternoon, and I would love to talk to you about the Word of God.
Wow. That is amazing. So you had to learn that. Where did you pick it up? On site?
Yeah, living in the village, working with the people. I would have a couple of guys that would help me and tutor me. There were other missionaries that had learned the language. And so there was some materials, but there was no teacher except the Indians, and just living with them and talking with them. And so we were there for 10 years, and I got to the point where I could preach. But after 20 years of not being there, I'm not that good at it anymore. But yeah, it was a task.
So how primitive was this area?
Where we were, it was thatched roof huts. The walls were made out of dirt. We got modern and made a house out of compacted dirt. They were formed into the shape of bricks, and sort of like adobe brick houses that we had one. To get cement on your floor, it would, we'd put it in the plane or bring it up by canoe, and it was very expensive. One bag of cement would probably cost about $300 or $400.
Oh my!
And then you had to plan on when you're going to get sand and gravel out of the river, and whether it'd be high or low. And so, building stuff and making it nicer was harder. So it was for the most part, when we lived there, when we first got there, it was a thatched roof with holes in it, a dirt floor, latrines out back. And so we raised our kids there. My wife and I went there. And the Lord got us into the whole idea of going to the jungle through 2 Indian children that we took into our home in the city. That a mentor of mine who was a missionary, been in Venezuela for close to 30 years, he introduced us to them, and my wife was homeschooling our kids, and so they just became a part of our family. My wife homeschooled them. They later went to Rio Grande Bible Institute because of the Spanish, and they're still in Venezuela, and praise the Lord for their lives. But by having them in our home, our attention switched from being with nationals to the Indian people in the jungle, and the Lord just, through all of that, it made it possible for us to go to the jungle. And we were there for 10 years, and it was a very important part of our lives. We loved it.
So what kind of impact were you able to have for the people? Did they ever accept you? Was it...
Oh, yeah. Actually, one of the head teacher in that village was able to convince people to take us in, because the girl that we had raised for 5 years without knowing him was actually her uncle. And so because he was her uncle, it was like, no questions. We were already part of the family. And so by moving in there, they could already trust us. And so they had a pastor who was leading, it was a Bible study, about 7 or 8 people. Some missionaries with Orinoco River Mission back in the 60s had worked there, and there was a small church there. And so when we went back, a lot of the stuff was gone and disappeared, and some people had fallen to sin. So we just started over again. But there was a guy that said, I'm the pastor. He's been leading it. And so I just stepped under him and began to train him as the pastor. And at the end, we had the church. We built the church building. We had about 150 people, which was, for the size of the village, probably about 40% of the village.
Wow.
And since we were thrown out of the village and had to go, and now we're in Paraguay, but since that time, they have started 4 other churches all by themselves in different areas on the river, and have trained their pastors, and they're just doing the missions work by themselves.
That is amazing. Wow. Now, something led to you leaving the country. Did you see this coming? Were you aware of, like, Hugo Chavez when he took over? Was there a process that you saw?
Yeah. As soon as he got into power, a lot of the Christians even voted for him, because it was more an economic thing. The people that were downcast, they thought that he would bring them prosperity. And with the socialist ideas and stuff, after he came into power, it became more control, and their political bent in Venezuela began to change. They became very xenophobic as far as the people, especially those who didn't know. It was like the political position of the government, and they began to align. Like Iranians began coming in, and they actually opened up a mine, and that's one of the reasons why they wanted missionaries out. And so it was New Tribes missions. There were independent missionaries down in the jungle. Southern Baptists were down there, and it's pretty much everything went totally with the national people, and all the foreign missionaries had to leave. But the church, in a lot of ways, was like a teenager that all of a sudden realized, hey, wait a minute, we don't have missionaries, and they stepped up, and the church has grown. It's gotten stronger, and it's just been amazing. Yeah.
Now, was Venezuela? Was it just a dictatorship, or was it actually a communist country, or how would you describe politics?
It was socialist, leaning towards communism, and yeah, he was a dictator. Especially once Chavez died, and then Maduro came into power. They had political prisoners. In fact, Americans were actually political prisoners in Venezuela. And you just going as a tourist, you could get arrested because they said you were the CIA. You'd be there, and you'd be held for 6-8 months, a year. There were some people that were over for 2 years, and it was mainly just a way to have an ace in the hole that they could use as a trading thing with international politics. And we found that being a missionary, we very quickly began to see it changing, where if Venezuelans had friends who were missionaries, and even if you had nothing to do with politics, it became very detrimental for them in their jobs. and in their life, and political pressures were put on them where you became, in your presence as a missionary, detrimental to the Christians. And our first director at BIM was a guy named Roy Ackerley, and he was on the last plane out of Cuba. And he had always told us, hey, if there's ever a time where your presence becomes detrimental to the Christians, that's when you know it's time to leave.
Yeah, I knew Roy Ackerley fairly well. We'd had him at our church before. He sang a little Spanish song. He played the piano and sang.
Yes.
And I never forgot it. That's amazing. He played it one time and it stuck with me. That's funny. But now you're pretty near the equator there, aren't you?
Yeah, right there. We were 5 degrees above the equator.
Oh.
It was very hot. We were in the actual rainforest where probably about 3 months out of the year, it would seem like the sun was a 40-watt bulb that went from east to west, and you never saw it because of the cloud cover so much and the dampness.
Shoot.
And the humidity was usually 100%, 99% on a good day. Shoot. And it was just part of the life there.
Yeah. Now, did you have to take a siesta? Did people do that every day?
Oh, yeah. They would get up real early, like 4 or 5 in the morning when it was cool, do a lot of the things that they could. And during midday, they'd be in their hammocks taking it easy because I guess what they used to say about only dogs and Englishmen worked during the siesta, and that was still part of the culture there.
Wow.
The idea of taking a siesta when it's hot, it was just the only thing to do, just take it easy. And one of the things that's still happening with the village, they've started those other churches, but they're also, I have a group of the guys from our village. Presently, New Tribes is revising the New Testament, and then there's 5 guys on a team that I'm helping and consulting with them to translate the Old Testament, which they've never had in their language. And they finished Genesis, and they're working in Exodus now, but they took Genesis back and they just read it to the old people. And they said the tears just flowed because they never heard God speak their language of those old stories. And so they're excited, and they're working on that, and we're supporting them and helping them through that.
Well, what about, is AI helping with any of this translation now?
I don't know, because, Yekwana isn't really a studied language as far as outside of their group. I don't know what it could. That's beyond me. So I don't know.
Well, obviously some languages and some tribal languages, they must have access to it.
I guess they have been getting in, but I've just never even.
Yeah.
That's so, I'm just from the old generation where it's like, that was never possible. So you're asking me that question. That's the first time it even popped into my mind.
Wow. Yeah, that's. I'm not sure either. Everything you can do with AI, but it's pretty incredible some of the things that they're doing. And now you can translate, write something today. Mm-hmm. It's all English, and then just quickly in AI you can translate it all to Spanish.
Yeah, I guess it would just be getting it into the database.
Yeah,
right now one of our guys
you have to format it, and you have to check. Sometimes misuse of words or something. Somebody'd have to check it. We did that in Japanese. I had no idea if it's good or bad. I just sent it and said, let the national pastors look at it and see if they can correct it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it would save an enormous amount of time if it's possible, but probably not, like where your group was.
Right now, what we're hoping to do is once Venezuela calms down a bit more and when it begins to open up more, because I guess they're talking about reopening the embassy there. And if things begin to get better, then I'll be able to go in and stay with them for a month or 2 months at a time. And, we can really get things moving a lot faster. And we'll see if that might be a question to look into.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully that happens. You just never know. But right now, I think people are pretty optimistic.
Yeah. I think it's going to work out the way they're. Yeah. The Venezuelan people are excited. The churches are excited. Things have begun to change.
Well, I know it wasn't a rich country in a lot of ways, but they did have a lot of natural resources, and I don't think it was necessarily a poor country.
Back in the 70s, like during the OPEC oil embargo and stuff.
Oil embargo.
In Venezuela, they were a very rich nation at that time. As Chavez came in, he used the oil finances and money to influence politics throughout South America, and so he stopped investing in the company. And so the company downgraded because of lack of maintenance and lack of good guy. A lot of men were leaving. The engineers would go somewhere else for British Petroleum or something like that. And so they didn't have the high skill. But at its time and at its height, PDVSA was the best run state oil company. And there was a time when we first got there back, we arrived in 86. But in the earlier 80s, the money was very strong, the Bolivar. And it was common to hear someone in the middle class saying, yeah, we went to Miami about a month ago. And they would just fly to Miami, go shopping, and then turn around and come back.
Wow.
That it was actually inexpensive for them. And they were one of the richest countries in South America at the time. And with the government the way it went, they became one of the poorest countries.
Well, I hope somebody in America listens to this about what socialism does.
Yeah.
Boy, it seems like we keep being threatened by these ideas, and they don't work.
Yeah. And preaching the gospel down there, it's like that was one thing that was never. It was the foreigners being down there was the problem, and the Christians in the country, they continued to preach, and they just once they got over the fact that they were alone, they began to step out by faith and realize that actually one of the best things that was ever said was the pastor of the village where we worked in Chahuranya, when I told him, I said, we have to leave. The government has told us that we'll be persona non grata if we're here, and if they come in, they're taking us out in handcuffs, and so we're leaving because it's the best thing for you. And he broke into tears, but then he said, they can take the missionaries out of our village, but they'll never take the Holy Spirit out of our hearts.
Shoo. Wow. That says something about his testimony.
Yeah. And love him. Name's Victor Hernandez, and he's still the pastor there in Chahuranya.
Wow.
And he's trained his guys, and it's him, the group that he's trained in his church, that are the translators for the Old Testament.
That is terrific.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to wind this up, but tell me a good story of animals or snakes or something like that.
Okay. Everybody always hears about the worm story, so I'll tell you that. The worm story is about, I got in a canoe with a guy from another village. And a lot of times people ask the question, well, how far are you willing to go to give the gospel? What are you willing to do? And I'm in this, as a guy from another village, and he thought missionaries were useless. We don't need them coming to teach us our ways are wrong and to change. And so I'm like, okay, I didn't know how to really get into him. And then he decided, as we were going, he says, you do realize what we're eating for lunch? And I said, no, I don't. Nobody told me. He says, we're stopping in a certain place where the earthworms are. And the earthworms we're talking about are about 1 meter long, and they're as big as your pinky. And there's a whole technique for digging them out of the soft sand. You have to do it after the river's risen and then fallen real quickly. And you get there that day, and there's all kinds of worms in this sand, and you just break the sand away and you pull them out. And, the joke is that it's an easy thing for the women to cook because they just put the worms in a bucket full of water, and they put it over the fire, and then they don't even have to stir it because the worms are all moving while they're cooking. And I'm watching him do this, and he's like, you've ever eaten worms? I said, no, I've eaten, tapir, I've eaten wild pig, I've eaten this, and akuri, pikuri, and just went off with all the things I had eaten. He says, but you've never had these? I says, no. He says, well, a lot of the missionaries that come down tell us we have to change, but this is the way it is. Are you willing to eat these? And I said, yeah, of course. Wasn't really too sure about wanting to, but I was willing to. And so he took out a piece of the cassave bread, and he took one worm out and then just sort of like dangled it. It looked like a hot dog when the worm was boiled. It was in there. And I was praying. It's like, Lord, please help me get this down. It was not good. It was real chewy, and as I swallowed it, I'm just praying, Lord, please don't let me lose it here in front of him, because within 2 or 3 days, the entire village, the entire river would know that I had lost it on this. And I got it down, and I was breathing, and he looked at me and he smiled. And he says, did you like that? And I says, actually, no, I didn't. He says, but you were willing to try. We don't like them a lot of times either, but you have to eat what you have to eat because this is where we live. And I said, I understand that. He says, but a lot of people from the outside, they look down on us because we eat things that they said we'd never eat that. He says, but when your kids are starving, you have to. And so we have to take care of this. And I said, I understand that. And I'm not like those people that come and judge you and tell you how to change. He says, I'm here to tell you about the love of Christ. And I was able to witness to him.
Wow.
Before eating those worms, he wasn't going to listen to me about anything. But after being willing to sit down with him and eat what he was eating, he listened to the gospel. Yeah. At that point, he didn't get saved. I don't know if he ever got saved because he was a different village and he was just there, but I was able to share the gospel with him. And then after I had finished talking and everything like that, she says, you know what? I really don't want to eat these worms either. And he had already seen that I had a can of tuna fish and some crackers. He says, can we have tuna fish and crackers? And so we broke out the tuna fish and we both ate that together. And it changed where when he would come to our village again, he would come to my house and we would talk. And he became a friend. And I would always be able to share the gospel, but it started with eating worms.
What a story. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But, that's the willingness of a missionary. I'll do anything, go anywhere, and do whatever it takes to try and get the gospel.
Yeah. How much is the gospel worth to you?
Yeah. Well, it's great that we finally met, and because we've been missing one another, running around in circles. And
I drove right past where your church was for many years because my grandmother lived in Bristol.
Yeah.
And you were up there, and I always heard your name, always knew where the church was. And then my brother, I was like...
we saw one another a lot through sports and school and all that. Yeah.
So it is good to meet you.
Yeah. Well, it's been a good meeting so far. We're here in Brazil, South America.
Uh-huh.
And you came all the way down. Of course, I flew down for the conference, so...
I came up from Paraguay, where I was.
Yeah.
So that's probably about half the United States for me to get here.
You had to fly in then, too.
No, I came on a bus.
You came on a bus?
Nice bus with a bed, so it was not too bad. It was more comfortable.
Good. Well, folks, thanks for listening today. We trust you have a good day. God bless.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, consider sharing it with a friend. You can also follow at Dr. Townsley on Twitter or on Facebook at Jim Townsley.